Hello friends, it's me, and today let's watch Film Theory. The Walten Files is back and creepier than ever from the Film Theorists. Together, let's go. Let's start. Thank you.
The Walten Files are back. One of the scariest analog horror series we've ever covered has even more videos and even more mysteries, and we are finally digging into its newest release, and this story is so much darker than I ever expected. Hello internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show that just gets so frustrated when movies drop their trailers at like the worst times for us to cover them. Now,
Hello internet, welcome to Film Theory. Let's begin.
You didn't see, the trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 2 dropped last Thursday, just as I was finishing up this script and didn't have time to shift directions. But hey, we'll be diving into that analysis hopefully next week. And in the meantime, well, today we're finally jumping back into the Walten Files, created by animator Martin Walls. Not a bad substitute for FNAF, right? If you don't remember, and I don't blame you, it's been years since we covered this series, the Walten Files is all about some haunted animatronics with bodies stuffed into them in a Chuck E. Cheese inspired restaurant. Yes, this is wearing its FNAF influence on its sleeve, but unlike FNAF, the Walten Files was able to get much darker with how it treated its subject matter. This series doesn't pull any punches in both its imagery and how its characters react to it. The Walten Files centers on a burger restaurant called Bon's Burgers, founded by Jack Walten and Felix Kranken, with 5 animatronic characters: Bon Bunny, Boozoo, the Ringmaster, Shaw the Sheep, Billy the Clown, and Banny, another rabbit, don't question it. But of course, something goes terribly wrong in the restaurant, as there's a string of disappearances and deaths that eventually lead to it closing, being reopened years later, and of course, more deaths. We're seeing all of this through the eyes of our main character, Sophie Walten, last surviving member of the Walten family, who has repressed these dark memories but is still being chased by the monster that killed the other Waltens. All of the uploads in the series are actually tapes put together by a mysterious character named Anthony, as we see in the description of each YouTube video. And while previous entries hid story elements in unlisted videos and the comments section, this newest entry leaned into putting most of its terrifying elements directly in the video itself, as well as sprinkling hints across an ARG website and non-canon uploads on the channel. Honestly, the mystery here is dense, but I wouldn't have that any other way. The Walten Files has never been an easy nut to crack, and while I feel good about what we've put together here today, we're probably gonna need just a little bit more from the series before we can solve everything. But for now, dig your grave, loyal theorists. We're jumping back into the Walten Files. So to start things off, just like the other videos in the series,
let's begin. Let's start.
The events of the Walten Files 4 are told out of order. We jump forward and backward in time, see scraps of info from various points in the timeline, and often don't know who exactly a character is supposed to be. So I'm gonna be doing my best to try to piece this together into as coherent a story as I can for you, but I really recommend that you go check out Martin's work to experience it firsthand. Like, for real, the horror just really lands. But what's the story being told here? Well, you can break it down into one of several storylines. Let's dig into them one by one. The first storyline we follow shows us the fates of Ed and Molly Walten. We open on the Brighton Community Schools spring party event of 1974, but the event has clearly ended, and Ed and Molly seek out Felix, hoping to get a ride home. We know from earlier in the series that this would be a tragic, fatal mistake, but what exactly happens becomes far clearer here. For instance, we hear more about Felix's drinking problem. It's bad enough that his co-workers all seem to know about it.
I'm gonna be totally honest with you. Knowing Felix, he's probably drinking somewhere in town.
Tragically, as Felix drives them home, his intoxication causes them to crash through a metal railing, hit a tree, and kills the children instantly. Felix himself is—
Okay, so side rant. I'm so glad that in Singapore, driving and drinking, these two things is very costly in Singapore. So this Singapore government disincentivize you to drink alcohol. This incentivize you to drive a car. Replacement of alcohol, something else. Sports like drinking water, sports drinks. Replacement for driving your own car. Public transportation in Singapore is very reliable.
Is injured but survives. Later that night, at 12:23 a.m., we see Jack Walten arrive at Felix's house, concerned about his kids. He begins knocking on the doors and windows, desperately trying to get Felix to respond.
Felix, if you do anything to those kids, I'll kill you.
But Felix isn't at home. He's at the accident site and spent the night digging graves for the two kids. Curiously, he also dug a third hole, seemingly for himself, but doesn't do anything with it. He stares at the bloody rocket rabbit doll that Molly was carrying and eventually decides to get rid of the evidence. He carries the kid's bloody doll and backpack through the forest to a nearby cliff where he tosses the backpack over, hoping to get rid of it. However, as he considers throwing the rabbit over and falling himself, Felix can't bring himself to do it and instead returns home with the plush.
You know, if you're attacked by haunted animatronics, you're probably gonna need to see a specialist for that. And thankfully, these sort of specialists are easy to find thanks to ZocDoc, the sponsor of today's theory. So I just turned 32 in July, and honestly, I've been thinking a lot about my health lately. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I wanna make sure that I take care of myself. But making theories just takes so much time. Plus, I just moved states last year, and finding new doctors is such a pain, especially ones that will actually listen to you. So when I heard about ZocDoc, I knew that this would be a game changer. If you don't know ZocDoc, they're a free website that helps you search and compare high quality doctors for your needs. They're not providing the care themselves, but they're helping you find and choose the right in-network doctors for whatever you might need. And they'll help you book appointments with more than 100,000 providers covering pretty much everything from mental and dental health, eye and skin care, and so much more. They also make it super easy, allowing you to filter by who accepts your insurance, how close they are, and their rating from other patients. You can do it all online instead of over the phone, see actual appointment times, and choose when to click and book your visit. And they happen fast, typically within just a few days. When you found the doctor you need, you can see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works for you, and instantly book a visit with just a few clicks.
So if you want to stop putting off your appointments and take your health seriously, go to ZocDoc.com/thefilmtheorists or click the link in the description to find a top-rated doctor today.
Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring this theory. Now, let's jump back into the Walten files.
At his
Well, thank you so much for supporting the film theorists in this video. Thank you so much. Let's continue.
home, we hear that Felix is overcome with feelings of guilt and it's affecting him deeply.
I haven't been able to sleep since last week.
He finally tells the Waltens what happened about the accident, and the family holds a private funeral for the children, but their bodies are never recovered.
The fact that they're still buried down there, it haunts me every night.
Understandably, the Waltens despise Felix now, and his life begins to disintegrate.
I have no idea what's gonna happen to me now. My life, my business, everything.
And this isn't the only thing haunting Felix now. When Rosemary Walten asks about the Rocket Bunny doll, Felix lies and says that the kids left it at school, but instead, he took it home, and it's in his house. But it isn't alone. We see a shot of the doll in Felix's house, and if you look closely at the glass window behind it, you can see two faces appear from the darkness, the spirits of Ed and Molly attached to the doll and haunting Felix, just like we theorized earlier in the series. And what's even creepier and much worse, the spirits knock on doors inside of Felix's house and call out to him. I don't know about you, but I would be freaking out if I heard this. Felix then opens the door, but only finds the doll. Begging for this nightmare to stop, Felix eventually brings the doll into Bond's Burgers, at the very least just to get it out of his home. Creepy.
Yup, that's saying in Chinese. 一失足成千古恨. One misstep creates thousands of years of regrets. 一失足成千古恨. Yes.
Stuff. And thankfully, the second storyline we follow here is a little bit less terrifying. Well, mostly. Sprinkled throughout the video are tapes describing how the animatronic characters in the Showstoppers were designed and created. For example, we learn that Rosemary Walten, mother of Ed and Molly, whose soul is now trapped inside of Shaw the Sheep, originally designed the characters.
She's the one in charge of making the final designs that would later become the characters they are today.
We then jump to a technical test of a new feature of the animatronics, facial recognition. During this period, we hear two technicians talk about the technology, the Felix, and the tragedy surrounding Ed and Molly, and both of the technicians are actually characters we've heard of before, Susan and Charles. If you don't remember, Susan was a character we met earlier in the series, the main technician for the animatronics who was killed. Maybe, it's unclear, she should be dead but might also still be alive in a weird undead way, and has somehow possessed Banny the bunny. Likewise, Charles is a character that has also been missing since around the time the restaurant shut down. This video gives gives us a bit more insight into the pair and a bit more information about how and why they vanished. Well, at least for Susan, but we'll get back to that in our third big storyline. Anyway, through Susan and Charles, we learn that the animatronics have a pretty advanced facial recognition system installed, which honestly is like pretty crazy for the 1970s. Like, that's some space-age sci-fi technology we were just cramming into these robots. But of course, this is a horror series, and if we introduce this new feature, we have to use it for a scare. We hear a conversation from Susan and Charles about the tragic deaths of Ed and Molly, and the two comment about how they don't believe Felix's story.
You don't think Felix's story lies, don't you?
Story? Nothing. I think something else happened, man. Something worse.
And they're incredibly uncomfortable that the bloody doll that Mary was carrying is now in the restaurant.
I don't even want to think
Okay, look, I don't think it's absolutely the lie. I don't think it's absolutely the truth. People tend to hide things or conceal things that will further damages themselves or hurt themselves. They will just expose whatever that is necessary. It's like saying half truth, but not the full truth.
about it. Living that freaking doll in the room.
And honestly, it's for good reason. After the pair
Or you twist the narrative to better suit you, your side of the story. You twist the narrative, or you manipulate the way that people feel or think about it. Yeah. Or you just change the chronological order of what happened. That is what happens to a lot of people. That is devilish. As you grow up, you tend to interact with a lot of such nasty people, wicked people, malicious people. It sucks for genuine, kind-hearted, sincere individuals.
leave the room, the doll starts moving on its own, approaching one of the animatronics. The facial recognition software runs, detecting two faces, and though it originally can't identify them, it eventually settles on Ed and Molly. We also see two blue squares on the map of the restaurant here, which I assume represents the two spirits, though they were represented by the color red in earlier videos. Not sure why that changed. Anyway, the third big storyline in this video involves the actual disappearance of Susan. Yeah, we actually finally see what happens here in part 4, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. At one point in the tape, we see some text burned into the screen. It's flipped, but when you orient it right, you can see that it's a letter addressed to Felix, concerned about the disappearance of Susan and questioning if Felix had any involvement in it. And though Felix is definitely shady and responsible for multiple deaths already, well, what happened to Susan is much, much worse. In another strange moment, we see a top-down view of the backstage of the restaurant, and a mysterious ghostly figure wanders onto the screen. We actually see this guy a couple other times in the video for like a split second, but this is our clearest view of him so far. The spirit wanders over to the Bon animatronic and enters it, taking possession of it. It's clear that this is the spirit haunting Bon. We then see Susan enter the backstage area, and, well, the results are absolutely brutal. Like, I'm not sure we can show most of this on YouTube brutal. Susan searches for something in the backstage before she's ambushed by Bon. Bon breaks Susan's neck and disfigures her face, taking glee in his work before dragging her deeper into the darkness. Later, we see Bon stuffing Susan's body into the Banny suits, the whole thing witnessed by the spirits of Ed and Molly. All of a sudden, we cut to this strange scene, a field of grass with a white sky. If I were to guess, this is some sort of purgatory. We see the spirits of Molly and Ed arguing here, debating if they should help Susan, before Susan's spirit also enters the scene. Here, we also see the evil white spirit, who introduces himself only as Bon. Really confusing that the spirit who possesses the Bon animatronic is also named Bon, but they're like two different entities? But hey, you can't win them all. Anyway, Bon promises that
So we just acknowledge that their faces are just exactly at the uncanny valley of how humans will feel looking at them. Sorry.
Susan won't die.
Don't you worry. You're in safe hands, Susan. Welcome to Wonderland.
Bon insists that Susan is still alive. Her heart is still somehow beating, which lines up with what we saw in previous entries. He also explains that he likes to fix things just like Susan and offers to fix Susan by forcing her into the Banny suit, which she seemingly accepts. This is how Susan came to possess that animatronic, her own eye looking out of Banny's eye socket. It's just dark stuff, man. After Susan and Bond leave, Ed and Molly reappear. They're clearly scared of Bond and decide they need to wait just a little bit longer before they do, well, whatever it is they're gonna do. And with that, this installment of the Walten Files comes to a close. So, we got a lot of new information in this upload, and even with me taking all the storylines and laying them out pretty clearly, there are still some pretty big mysteries left for us to try to piece together. And the most obvious one, right off the bat, what or who the heck is this Bond spirit? Now, I wish I could come down here and just say that there is a definitive answer, but sadly, I can't. Frankly, we just don't have enough information to properly give an explanation. At first, I wondered if he might be some incarnation of Jack Walten. What exactly happened to Jack is still a pretty big loose end, one that we've been trying to figure out for years, and at first I thought that this episode might tell us a little bit more. See, in a section of the tape describing how the animatronics were designed, Jack's name is missing.
Rosemary Walten, loving wife of... is a brilliant artist.
Did you catch that? Despite being in the closed captions, Jack's name is completely left out of the audio, like it was cut. This was a deliberate decision, and I was wondering if this was somehow the tapes trying to erase Jack, or replace him with Bond, or something like that. A character who was terrified of what he had become with Bond and just trying to erase him from anything else in the story. Additionally, these tapes aren't actually the first time we've seen Bond, or at least this spiritual incarnation of Bond. No, that came from a website called Find Jack Walten from all the way back in 2021. Yeah, there's an ARG
Exactly during the global pandemic.
website because this is a classic analog horror series. Of course, there's an ARG website. Though it looks much different now, this website started as a sort of missing persons profile for Jack, and huge shoutouts to the fans maintaining the Walten Files wiki for preserving these older versions of the site. Anyway, the original version of the website was just a picture of Jack and a description of where he was last seen, but over time, it updated with new photos that just kept getting creepier and creepier. And then finally, on July 17th, 2023, a new image was found. A monochrome man wearing a black tie with the text, "The future starts now." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, while this might have seemed like nothing to start with, slowly, the image started duplicating until it basically covered the entire screen. Elsewhere, text read, "Say my name." And then, "We haven't met before, have we? Pleasure to meet you. My name is..." And then finally, a white man with a black tie, and he says, "Vaughn." Exactly like he was introduced in the Walten Files 4.
Pleasure to meet you. My name is Bond.
That's a pretty big point in the Bond is Jack theory column. I mean, this was a website dedicated to Jack, but that just doesn't sit quite right with me for a few reasons. Honestly, mostly the same reasons that's been bothering us since the last time we covered the series. See, there's another character in the series called the Shadow Man who appears to be responsible for the death of Rosemary and stuffing her into Shaw the sheep. That's a very similar MO to how Bond killed Susan, so I think that these two characters are actually the same character. This connection between the Shadow Man and Bond is actually something Martin Walls got asked about directly, and his only answer was, "Good question." So I think that there's fire for all of that smoke. Anyway, it just doesn't really make sense to me that Jack would want to kill Rosemary, or that the ghosts of Ed and Molly would almost seem afraid of Bond in this upload if he were Jack. So I don't think that's quite the case. No, instead, I actually see a lot more evidence connecting Bond.
Okay, look, I think that there's a lot of potential, to be honest with you. It's like so many mystery that is captivating to continue watching. So, good job.
To Felix. Not that they're necessarily the same person, I don't think there's enough to say that, but there's a lot connecting them. Mostly, it's because of the mysterious deaths and murders. All of the people who died are directly connected to Felix, or seem to question Felix's story about the deaths of Molly and Ed. Here, check this out. In the Walten Files 4, we hear that Felix confessed to Jack and Rosemary that Ed and Molly are dead.
I finally told him what happened. It was in my office. It was the longest hour of my life. The most painful conversation I've ever had. Pain in their eyes, the anger. They both hate me now. I have no idea what's going to happen to me now. My life, my business, everything.
Felix is confused about what to do next and worried about his future in the business if this information gets out. And what happens soon afterwards? Jack goes missing, leaving Felix open to eventually take over and move the business. Awfully convenient, isn't it? There's also the case with Susan and Charles, who speculate that there's more happening with Felix than he's letting on, and that his story about Ed and Molly isn't actually true.
I don't think
Felix's story. Fine, don't you?
Story? I think something else happened, man. Something worse.
And again, they both disappear or die. In fact, other than Sophie, who absolutely is a target, the only person central to this story and the deaths of Ed and Molly that we get no indication has disappeared or has been killed is Felix. If Bond had some other reason to want to capture or kill or torture everyone involved with Bond's Burgers, either as an act of revenge for the deaths of Ed and Molly or something else entirely, then why is Felix, the co-founder who revived the restaurant after it closed the first time and the person directly responsible for those deaths, not targeted? That doesn't make any sense. I don't believe that we have enough information quite yet to really figure out why or how exactly Felix and Bond are working together, or even if they're doing so intentionally, but something is happening. And if I had to bet about where this story would go next, well, they'll both want to tie up that last loose end for Felix killings of the Walten kids, Sophie Walten. Yeah, as of the ending of the Walten Files 4, Sophie is the last member of the Walten family that's still alive or hasn't disappeared. But that doesn't mean she isn't a target. In the Walten Files 2, we hear a list of people that appear to be targets of the spirits.
Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, Sophie.
As of right now, Sophie's the only person on that list who's still alive, and as we discussed in our last theory, Bond is using the game Bunny Farm to try to jog Sophie's memory and lure Sophie to her death. Plus, in the very first Walten Files episode, we know that the security guard Brian Stells was killed because Bond, quote, he thought I was her. Brian was wearing a uniform that Sophie also used to wear, but that becomes even more interesting when we know why this mix-up happened. If you listen really closely to a conversation between Susan and Charles in the Walten Files 4, we get this little tidbit of information.
But we're going to do a secondary test because the console seems to have trouble detecting the faces.
Oh, the test we did with Sophie, right.
That facial recognition technology, the one that's so good that it can detect the faces of ghosts like Molly and Ed, it couldn't read Sophie's face. Something about Sophie is different, and that's going to play a key role in where exactly this series goes in the future. Stick with me here. One of the additional videos that Martin Walls created and uploaded to the Walten Files channel is called The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit, a continuation of another special video called The Mysterious House. Now, to be clear, Martin has gone on record saying that these videos are not specifically canon to the Walten Files universe, but I do believe
But maybe it takes inspirations or some bits and pieces as reference points? Maybe?
we can use them to get a sense of where Martin's head is at, and potentially see if he's testing ideas for the main canon story. So what happens in these specials? Well, if you don't remember The Mysterious House, this was a Halloween special where a group of trick-or-treaters are lured into a house so they can be murdered, and the people responsible share similarities to the showstopper animatronics. Seems oddly similar to the main story that we've laid out so far, doesn't it? And in The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit, we see 4 kids enter another abandoned house, but this one is said to be the home of a group of serial killers called the Watermen. Of course, it turns out that this house is not abandoned, and 2 of the kids meet a gruesome fate at the hands of the killers. But this story does end on a somewhat lighter note, when the main character Jay uses her lighter to set fire to the Watermen's photo book. This has photos of the victims inside and invigorates their bodies to rise up and fight back. They then kill the Watermen and end the nightmare once and for all. Now again, I cannot stress enough that these videos are not canon, but there are still tons of similarities between what we're seeing here and what's in the actual Walten files. For example, the character Pumpkin Rabbit is not only voiced by the same actor who voices Bond, but he's also a serial killer who claws at the faces of their victims, just like Bond did to Susan. Additionally, Jay also uses her lighter to burn the photo album, which causes the downfall of the serial killers. And one of the only times we see Sophie in the Walten files has her holding a lighter, just like Jay. Just like the Pumpkin Rabbit is the stand-in for Bond in this special, Jay is the stand-in for Sophie. And that means that just like Jay helped turn the victims against the serial killers, Sophie's going to help the victims of Bond rise up to defeat him, to escape this hell that they're trapped in. And
But it might just be a theory.
that is how the Walten files will end. Now, all we have to do is wait patiently for the next couple of episodes in the Walten files to answer all of our questions. In the meantime, maybe we'll do videos breaking down the spin-off minisodes like Hotline. Let me know in the comments if that's something you're interested in. But until then, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory. And today is no different, loyal theorists, as we dive into Smilehood, the latest project from Dr. Nowhere.
Well, thank you so much for watching this video from the Film Theorists. Thank you so much. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Subscribe. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.